You've heard the stories before. The sea stretches endless and black, and then something moves beneath your ship. Not a wave, not a whale, something larger. Imagine being a sailor centuries ago, with no radar, no sonar, no satellite maps. Every sound in the water was a mystery. Every shadow could mean disaster. Out of that fear, a legend took shape, the Kraken. For generations, sailors in the cold northern waters whispered of a beast vast enough to be mistaken for an island. They swore it could send entire ships to the bottom with a single surge of its arms. In the 12th century, the Norsemen Orvarada told tales of sea monsters so huge they dwarfed the horizon. By the 18th century, European writers described the Kraken as a many-armed terror, its limbs tangling sails and pulling men into the deep. You can almost see why these legends caught on. Ships were fragile wooden shells compared to the forces around them. Storms rose without warning. Vessels vanished without explanation. And when half-eaten whale carcasses or strange, tentacled remains washed ashore, what else were sailors supposed to think? They filled in the gaps with monsters. But here's the unsettling part. Legends like these don't appear out of nowhere. They grow from moments sailors couldn't explain. A sudden suction beneath the waves. A mistimed swell that sent timbers splintering. Glimpses of long, pale arms breaking the surface. Was it pure imagination? Or was something real hiding beneath the fear? You have to put yourself in their place. Out at sea for months, cut off from land, surrounded by endless water. The line between truth and myth blurred with every new voyage. The Kraken wasn't just a creature, it was a warning. A reminder that the ocean holds power beyond anything you can control. And yet, legends always leave you with a question. What if those old sailors weren't entirely wrong? If you strip away the sailor's fear and the embellishment of folklore, you start to see the outline of a real creature hiding inside the legend of the Kraken. That creature is the squid. Not the little ones that end up as calamari on a dinner plate, but giants living in the dark zones of the ocean. Take the giant squid, Architeuthis dux. For centuries, it was nothing more than rumor. Sailors claimed to see arms longer than masts and eyes glowing faintly in the water. Scientists dismissed it as fantasy because no one had ever caught one alive. But slowly, evidence piled up. Beaks found inside the stomachs of sperm whales, massive tentacles washed ashore in storms, sucker marks carved into whale skin like battle scars. Today, we know these animals can grow more than 40 feet long, making them among the largest invertebrates on Earth. And then there's the colossal squid, Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni. Shorter in length but far bulkier, it's built like a deep-sea tank. Instead of smooth suction cups, its tentacles carry swiveling hooks, tools evolved for tearing into prey in the pitch-black Southern Ocean. The biggest specimen ever recovered weighed nearly 1,000 pounds, with eyes the size of dinner plates. Imagine being a sailor who had never even seen a photograph of such a creature. One glimpse of a carcass rising out of the waves could easily inflate into a story of a monster large enough to sink a ship. When you don't understand scale, when you don't know how long those feeding tentacles can stretch, you fill in the blanks with terror. Could a squid really capsize a vessel? For modern ships made of steel, no. For a smaller wooden boat in rough seas, entanglement isn't entirely impossible, but there's no hard evidence of it ever happening. What is real are the scars, the fragments, and the rare deep-sea footage that proves enormous squid exist in the hidden world below. So maybe the Kraken wasn't pure invention. Maybe it was the human brain trying to explain encounters with predators that live in the shadows. And if evolution could produce squids that already brush against the edge of legend, what happens if nature scaled them up even further? So let's say the stories were true, not about a squid the size of a bus, but about a true Kraken, stretching over 100 feet long, with arms powerful enough to crush the hull of a ship like kindling. Imagine what that would mean for the world you live in today. First, think about the ocean highways. Nearly 90% of global trade travels by sea. If a predator that size lurked near shipping lanes, you wouldn't just lose cargo. You'd risk lives, economies, and entire supply chains. Ships would have to reroute around danger zones. Insurers would raise costs. Every container of food, oil, or medicine that crosses the ocean would suddenly carry a new price. The cost of surviving the Kraken. fishing would look completely different. A creature that massive wouldn't bother with small prey. It would hunt in bulk. Entire schools of fish, pods of dolphins, or even juvenile whales could vanish in a single strike. That means fewer catches for fishermen, empty nets, and devastated coastal economies. The ocean would belong to the Kraken first, and to you only if it allowed. And then there's the coast itself. Picture living near a harbor where the water runs deep. Every ripple could be a warning. Would you dare to swim? Would you trust a ferry to get you safely across a channel? Tourism would collapse in some regions, while others might turn the Kraken into a strange kind of attraction. Monster watching instead of whale watching. Governments would respond. Navies would design sonar systems to track it, while engineers worked on deterrence, strobe lights, sound cannons, maybe even decoy submarines. But you can't truly tame something that evolved in the dark, far from human control. The truth is simple. If the Kraken existed today, you wouldn't rule the seas. You would cross them like your ancestors once did, cautiously, nervously, always scanning the horizon and hoping the water stayed calm. Now, imagine what it would take to keep a creature like the Kraken alive. A body stretching more than 100 feet, with muscles thick enough to pull down a whale, would burn through energy at a staggering pace. Based on comparisons with large predators like sperm whales, you'd be looking at hundreds, maybe even thousands, of pounds of food every single day just to stay alive. That appetite wouldn't be satisfied with a few stray fish. A Kraken would need to hunt big prey. Schools of tuna, pods of dolphins, and even young whales could all end up on a menu. One strike of its arms could scatter entire shoals, and each time it fed, the ocean's balance would shift. Every kill would ripple outward through the ecosystem. Think about it. If the Kraken targeted whales, their numbers would drop. Fewer whales mean fewer nutrients falling to the seafloor when they die, which starves deep-sea creatures that rely on that whale fall cycle. If the Kraken hunted massive schools of fish, seabirds and smaller marine predators would suddenly find themselves competing for scraps. Ecosystems aren't built to withstand the arrival of a predator that rewrites the rules. And it wouldn't just be nature that suffered. Human industries would feel the weight too. Commercial fishing fleets depend on consistent stocks, but a Kraken would slash those numbers unpredictably. Quotas would collapse. Seafood prices would skyrocket. Some regions might abandon fishing altogether, unable to compete with a monster that could harvest the ocean with a single sweep of its arms. But not all effects would be destructive. Every kill the Kraken made would also fuel life. Scavengers, sharks, hagfish, crabs would gorge themselves on the leftovers. Nutrient surges would drift down to the abyss, feeding microscopic life and reshaping deep-sea communities. The Kraken wouldn't just take, it would redistribute. Still, the sheer scale of such a predator would place it at the absolute top of the food chain. Nothing would hunt it. Nothing would rival it. And if one existed, you'd have to wonder, how many oceans could truly support a creature that demands so much to survive? The balance of life at sea would tilt forever. Here's the final question. If a Kraken that massive truly existed, could the ocean keep it hidden from you? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. More than 80% of the seafloor remains unmapped in detail, and the vast midnight zone, where sunlight never reaches, swallows anything in silence. It's the perfect place for myths to live. The deep sea already hides giants. Giant squid eluded cameras until the 21st century, and colossal squid were known only from pieces found in whale stomachs. If creatures that large could stay out of sight for centuries, could something even bigger be waiting in trenches and canyons you've barely glimpsed? You'd look for clues. Unusual scars on whales, massive sonar shadows that don't match known species, reports from submarine crews or deep-sea cable workers who see things they can't explain. Even today, there are moments of evidence that hint at more than science has confirmed. Odd sounds recorded by hydrophones, carcasses too decayed to identify, or legends that seem strangely consistent across cultures. But here's the challenge. The bigger an animal gets, the harder it is to hide. A predator 100 feet long would need vast hunting grounds and enormous amounts of prey. It would leave behind unmistakable signs, feeding scars, unusual population crashes, or encounters with ships that couldn't be ignored. And yet, none of those signs have ever been verified. So maybe the Kraken has always been a story, woven from half-seen squid and storm-lost ships. Or maybe it represents a possibility that the ocean, deep and largely unexplored, is still capable of surprises larger than you can imagine. When you stare at the horizon, you can't help but wonder, what's just beneath that calm surface? Because until you've mapped every trench and listened to every current, you'll never fully silence the thought that somewhere in the dark, the legend of the Kraken still breathes.